As we begin today's podcast, I give you permission to opt out, to not participate, and we are briefly reminded why a BB gun may not make a great Christmas gift, and why you should decline if your friends offer you the cherished position of going to select the Christmas tree for their pageant. And then we talk about everything from fruitcake to life on the American frontier, all in pursuit of revealing the truth that what you learned about Christmas is wrong.
Welcome to the Sky Pilot podcast that explores questions of faith, spirituality, and religion. I'm Dan Matthews, and I don't have all the answers, but I do enjoy the questions. Welcome to the podcast where every question is an invitation into a spiritual quest, and you're invited along for the journey.
Okay, before we get started, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It's quick, it's easy, it's free, it's painless. It will get you notified when I put out new videos, and it helps this brand new channel grow. So thanks in advance for your willingness to do this. And this is not so much a podcast on faith as many of my episodes are, or being a better believer as some of them are, but simply sharing some stuff you might not know, and therefore you might find interesting. Now, if you're a believer, you will find out something new about your own faith. And if you're a non-believer, you're welcome here too, because you're going to learn something as well, guaranteed, or your money back.
Pretty sure that no money was ever...
All right, first a point and then a disclaimer of sorts. There's nothing here that's designed or intended to rock your faith, nor ruin your Christmas. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. And if you're new to this channel, I'm even a seminary-trained ordained minister. Everything I'm about to tell you is fully compatible with the Christian faith. And also, as I just said, you don't need to be a believer to find this stuff that I'm going to be talking about interesting. Also, none of these are intended to be presented as irrefutable facts. I know the beginning started with "you're wrong," but that's just kind of a teaser to get you involved. But, and this might be a pretty big but for some people, I'm going to tell you some things that challenge elements that you probably thought were fact, and now you discover, well, some people think they might not be. So if you like The Christmas Story...
Oh, I do. I love that movie.
Ralphie, what would you like for Christmas?
Horrified, I heard myself blurt it out.
I want an official Red Ryder Carbine Action 200 range ball air rifle.
No. Shoot your eye out.
Oh no, it was the classic mother BB gun block. You'll shoot your eye out.
No, not that Christmas Story, the one about how Jesus was born, the one that Linus recites at the end of the Charlie Brown Christmas special. You remember when Charlie Brown buys a tree that everyone makes fun of, and he confesses after that failure that he obviously does not know what Christmas is really all about, and he asks for someone, anyone, to help him, someone who does know what it's all about.
I guess I really don't know what Christmas is all about. Isn't there anyone who knows what Christmas is all about?
Sure, Charlie Brown. I can tell you what Christmas is all about.
There you go. Linus steps up and says, sure, I know the answer to what you're asking. And then he proceeds to tell Charlie Brown the story, the Christmas story, not the movie that you're talking about, Jesus' birth. And he takes it by reciting the words from the Gospel of Luke. Anyway, if you like the story of Jesus' birth the way you've always heard it, and you don't want to hear anything different about that story, then turn this off. But not before you like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I hope you've already done that, actually. If, on the other hand, you'd love to know more about what's going on behind the scenes and why some parts of the story, as you and I learned them as children, are possibly not correct, then stay tuned. Some of these things that I will present, I'm guessing you already know, but I will guarantee that there are at least some here that you didn't know. You should know that nothing here changes, well, what Charlie Brown describes in that Charlie Brown Christmas special, what he describes as what Christmas is all about. None of this changes what Christmas is all about. Oh, and I will be presenting 5 just in case you like to kind of know that sort of thing and track it as we're going through. So let's start with the first, and probably the most likely that you already knew. Jesus was almost certainly not born on the 25th of December. Now, you may have heard this is because the church was trying to usurp a pagan holiday, or they wanted the birthday placed near the winter solstice. Scholars now believe that it was more about the early church leaders not knowing, well, first of all, they didn't know when his actual birthday was, and they wanted to place Jesus' birthday in a way that it have some sort of numerical significance as attested to by the day it landed on the calendar. Now, this is likely because the birthdays and death days of many Roman leaders were moved to dates that had some numerical significance. And so the Christian leaders of the early church said, we want the same thing for Jesus, for our leader. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining that. I have an episode on this if you want to hear the full explanation. And it's actually pretty interesting. I had fun writing it. Episode 140, entitled, Is December 25th Biblical? There isn't a video of that one, though, so if you're interested, you'll have to go and get it in audio-only podcast form. But no, he likely wasn't even born in December or any time in the winter or even the fall. He was likely born in the spring sometime. Evidently, shepherds would not have been out tending their flocks during the winter or late fall. Okay, so here's number 2, and it's one you might not know. A few biblical scholars say there was no star on the night that Jesus was born.
Now, wait a moment. You said there weren't going to be any elements of this that tear down the story. Now you're telling us there really wasn't even a star associated with Jesus' birth?
No, that is not actually what I said. Let me be clear. The Bible is clear that there was a star that heralded Jesus' birth. It's how the wise men found him. But there's also a sentiment amongst some scholars that the star did not appear on the night of his birth.
Okay, that seems still like a pretty big deal. Exactly how did you go about removing the star from the story of Jesus' birth?
Will you stop it? I did not remove the star. Will you just be quiet for a moment and let me explain? Do you remember who first visited Jesus after his birth? Do you? Hello? Quark?
I thought you said you wanted me to remain quiet. Yes, I remember. It was the shepherds.
Well, let's turn to the story from Scripture about the shepherds in the Gospel of Luke. And it says, I should just let Linus tell it since we had him introduce it earlier.
Lights, please. And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them. And the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not. For behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God, and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
Now, what you will notice right after the angel arrives, who scared the fool out of the unsuspecting shepherds, is that the angel gives them a sign on how to find this important newborn child. And some scholars have argued that if there was a star at this moment, the angel would have said, Hey, dudes, have you not noticed the new star above your head?
So that was your best angel impersonation, was it?
Well, you don't know what they sounded like. The Bible said it scared the shepherds, and I thought he sounded scary.
Oh, did he?
By the way, as I was preparing for this, I went to look for a picture of the shepherds in the field being visited by an angel, kind of like the one that I just showed you. And one of the early ones that I stumbled across was a picture of the shepherds and the sheep at night, of course, the angel. Here, I'll show it to you. I glanced at it and dismissed it immediately because it seemed a little too picturesque for me. I mean, honestly, it looks more like a Corona beer ad. Remember? Well, I'll show it to you. Remember this iconic Christmas time Corona ad? Anyway, it looked more like that ad than a realistic depiction of first century shepherds in Palestine. And as I said, the scene looks like they are at the beach more than on rough, rocky hills surrounding Bethlehem. And then as I'm looking at the picture, I've already decided not to use it. I look at the angel. The angel is see-through. That's what I noticed first, and then I saw it. Do you see it? I swear, this angel is Mary Poppins, which would explain a lot, actually. All she really needs for this angel to be Mary Poppins is to have a cute little Mary Poppins hat on her head. Wait, the angel is actually wearing a hat? But it gets even stranger. I thought I'd discovered Mary Poppins masquerading as angel, and then, well, as Quark likes to say as we look at this picture,
She has a tail.
it kind of looks like a tail, but could be the other end of the ribbon, too.
Nope, it's definitely a tail. Pretty sure there's some rule about angels not being allowed to have tails.
Yeah, if there's not, there should be. So I've decided to change the topic of this episode, this podcast, to what's wrong with this picture?
Really?
No. All right, enough of this rambling tangent.
It was fun, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it actually was. Anyway, we often have the impression that Jesus' birth was like an open house with a revolving door. The shepherds go out the back and the wise men come in the front, that kind of thing. And we think that actually for a very good reason. It works for the timing of Christmas pageants, movies, plays, children's books. But it's very much agreed by most Bible scholars that I've ever read. The wise men probably came some time later, weeks, perhaps months. Some even argue a year or more, because remember, Herod, being afraid of Jesus, orders to have all the little boys killed in that region. Herod ordered boys under 2 years old to be murdered in his effort to get rid of Jesus. If the wise men had arrived within days or hours or whatever of Jesus's birth, then his killing the boys that old would have made no sense. So according to the Bible, they didn't come on his birthday, so the star would have been later to guide them and was not needed the night of the birth because the shepherds had an angel an angel to tell them and perhaps lead them where to go. Here's another one that you may also know. This is number 3. There were not 3 kings who visited Jesus. Well, actually, what I just told you is kind of one truth and a half-truth. Nowhere in the Bible does it say the number of people who came from the east. The Gospel of Matthew says that they came from the east seeking the child who'd been born King of the Jews. But it tells, not once, how many there were. We got the number 3 by extrapolating, well, in a perfectly logical way, actually. The Gospel doesn't say how many visitors there were, but it very clearly says what they brought as gifts, and those gifts numbered 3. So the Christmas story was told and put on as pageants. It was a lot easier in those pageants to have one person for each gift. 3 gifts became 3 kings. Or if Gary Larson's version, Gary Larson of the Far Side fame, if Gary Larson's version is to be believed, there were actually 4 wise men, but one of them was turned away at the door for bringing fruitcake as a gift. Oh, and then there was a catchy song written about them in the 1850s, which we all learned. We've all heard so many times, we don't even know the first time we heard it. And because we all know it, it solidified our collective belief and our certainty in the number 3 and our awareness that they were 3 kings who visited Jesus. Oh yeah, so that brings me to another one. They weren't kings. They were wise men who studied the physical world, especially the stars, looking for clues. A better word is portents. Portents that pointed to important happenings going on in the world. They saw the star, they knew that something huge had happened, and they wanted to go see it. All right, here's an interesting one, and here's actually 2 that are related. You've probably heard the story that there was no room for them at the inn. So Mary was forced to give birth in a barn or stable. So let's start with the barn or the stable. That'll be number 4. When I was little, I heard the story told, and I imagined kind of the only barn that I had in my imagination that I knew, the barn on the TV show Bonanza. You remember the barn that was used by the Cartwrights on their ranch called the Ponderosa, which was, just for trivia's sake, a really large ranch. Oh, how large, you ask? I didn't ask. Quiet. 1,000 square miles, which is I mean, it's really big, roughly the size of Rhode Island, or a fifth the size of the entire state of Connecticut.
That is a big ranch. They must have been one of the wealthiest families in the nation on this television show, whatever it was, with a ranch that size.
I know, right? Anyway, theirs was the barn that I imagine Jesus being born in, which doesn't work in so many ways because it was set in the Old West, it was huge, and most importantly, there were no barns in Bethlehem. I don't mean there weren't many. To build a building for the exclusive use of farm animals would have been, by first century standards, an ostentatious waste of resources that would have even made the Cartwrights wince. It was difficult enough to find resources to build a home. No one built a barn or a stable to be exclusively used by their animals. Okay, finally, number 5. And this one, more than the others, feels like the biggest departure from the Christmas story. Even after I explain it, I think you'll feel the same way. You've seen the story portrayed as the innkeeper, who, his inn being full of the other travelers who were there for the census, he had to turn Mary and Joseph away because he could not take them in. He could not accommodate them in his establishment. Now, there are a couple of problems with this theory. If Joseph was going to Bethlehem to be counted for the census, that meant that his family was from Bethlehem. Chances were good, really good, that he had relatives in the area. So some scholars see the whole no room at the inn part of the story as being problematic for that reason.
But the Bible clearly says there was no room for them in the inn.
Yeah, about that. Does it say that? A recent look at the text has led some to believe that the word that has been translated inn, meaning kind of hotel, could have been better translated place to stay. There was no room for them at their place to stay.
You are not helping. What does that even mean?
Well, imagine that he had family who would, of course, have insisted that he and Mary stay with them. That would have been traditional and expected at the time. And they probably invited the holy couple to stay at their home, and they all squeezed into the family living quarters. As meager as that might have been, because it was probably very small space. Remember, this was a different time and place, and people did not have the same expectations for personal space, well, that we do today in Western culture. If Mary and Joseph were staying with a family of 5 people, then all 7 of them, the 5 family members, as well as Mary and Joseph, would have slept in the same room and thought nothing of it, no matter how much they had to squeeze in. But when Mary went into labor, it was probably decided by the family that Joseph and Mary now needed more space and more privacy than their quarters allowed. So the thinking goes, they moved them to where the animals were, out of the space they had been sharing with the family, because sleeping in a confined space is one thing, but then all of a sudden in that confined space, trying to birth a baby was quite another. Now, sometimes animals were kept in a nearby cave, used as a barn of sorts, and that might have been where Mary and Joseph were moved. But the theory that I've heard more about recently, in recent years, is the idea that the family may have had 2 rooms, as some did. And in this case, if a family could afford more than 1 room of their home, often the front room was used to keep any animals that they owned overnight. Now, this seems strange to our modern sensibilities, but just know that this was often done in the American frontier as well. A family would build a cabin, and there would be a sleeping space. In the American frontier, in the log cabin, it was often a loft above where everyone, no matter how many people in the family, everyone slept. Many members of the family, all crowded in that space. And the general living quarters down below were used to house the animals during the night. Now, when resources are scarce, any kind of farm animal is hugely valuable, and you would not put it at risk by leaving it outside at night. You bring it in for safety during the night. So it may even be that the animals were moved out for that particular night because this was such an important moment, the giving birth of this baby by Mary. And Mary and Joseph were given that space, which of course had a manger in it where the animals ate, and it was where Jesus was placed after his birth. And we're done. That's all for today. Interestingly, I find all of these to be thought-provoking and, at least in some respects, compelling. If I'm being honest, though, there's only one that really bothers me, and that is the new interpretation of no room for them at the inn. Given who Jesus was and what he talked about in his ministry, I think his family being turned away on the day of his birth is a compelling part of the story. On the first day of his life, his family was homeless. When his parents discovered that Herod wanted to kill him, he and his family became refugees as they fled to Egypt. And as for me, those are elements of the story that I'd like to keep because of what they imply about the future of Jesus' ministry. Also, the whole phrase, no room at the inn, feels like the author is intended to imply difficulty and hardship, not tending to imply an accommodating relative who was making concessions to make them more comfortable. But that's just my reaction to the text. I'd love to know what you think. How about you? What do you think about these? If you disagree or have one I should have included that I didn't add here, or simply want to say something to me after listening to this episode, I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to drop your thoughts, your comments in the comment section below. And on your spiritual journey, may you ask questions, seek answers, and boldly go wherever the quest takes you.
Thanks for joining us here today and being part of the Sky Pilot Faith Quest community. This is a great place to ask questions you wouldn't feel comfortable or safe asking in other places. And remember, the sign of a strong faith, solid religion, or healthy spiritual journey is not certainty, but that you keep asking questions.